2 guards asked Rural Marine to exit his son's graduation, until 5 SEALs silenced the crowd. Before we dive into this breathtaking story of overcoming obstacles, leave a comment below telling us which city and country you're watching us from. Stay tuned until the end. Arrival at graduation. Jack Reynolds drove his old truck through the streets of the small town, feeling the weight of the moment he was about to experience. His son Ethan in the passenger seat could barely contain his excitement for graduation, the culmination of years of dedication and effort. The ceremony would take place in the gymnasium of the local school, a simple place, but full of meaning for this humble family. Jack, a Navy veteran, was proud, although his face bore the marks of a hard life. Despite his pride, Jack felt a mixture of nervousness and apprehension. He was wearing the worn jacket he had worn since his Marine days, and his simple appearance stood out from the more formal attire of the other parents and guests. Maggie, his wife, looked at him tenderly, knowing that this moment was much more than an ordinary ceremony. For them, it was the celebration of a personal victory, of overcoming social barriers and difficulties. Ethan looked at his father with admiration and anticipation. It was the first time Jack had participated in such an important school event, and the young man wanted everything to be perfect. He knew that his father's presence there was a symbol of strength and an example for many. Even so, there was a silent fear that Jack's simplicity could cause some trouble in an environment that seemed so different from the world they knew. As they approached the gym, the movement of people grew, families gathered, and the atmosphere was festive. Jack shook Ethan's hand, feeling an intense emotion that mixed pride and fear. It was the beginning of a day they would never forget, even though at that moment no one imagined that honor and respect would be put to the test. The clash with the security guards. As Jack tried to enter the gym, he was immediately approached by 2 security guards who seemed suspicious of his presence there. Mike Turner, the head security guard, watched Jack critically, suspicious of his plain appearance and worn-out clothes. Without giving him any room for explanation, Mike asked Jack to leave, claiming that he shouldn't be there. Tom Davis, his partner, hesitated for a moment but ended up supporting Mike's decision. The embarrassment was immediate. Ethan, surprised and indignant, tried to argue that this was his father and that he had the right to be there for his graduation. However, Ethan's voice was drowned out by the firm stance of the security guards who did not allow Jack to continue. The tension grew quickly as other people began to notice the situation, some showing curiosity, others clearly uncomfortable with what was happening. Jack remained calm, even with the humiliation imposed on him. He knew he couldn't cause a scene, especially on such an important day for his son. Maggie tried to intercede, asking for respect, but was ignored. The silence around him increased the feeling of discomfort, and Jack realized that her appearance spoke louder than the past of honor and sacrifice he carried. What was supposed to be a moment of celebration turned into a scene of hidden prejudice and exclusion. The security guards, who were supposed to protect the event, seemed to be judging a person based on what he looked like, not who he really was. At that moment, Jack became the target of an unfair judgment, which could only be reversed with the intervention of those who truly knew his story. The public embarrassment. At the insistence of the security guards, Jack was forced to move away, leaving behind the entrance to the gymnasium where family and friends had gathered to watch the ceremony. The public humiliation was felt by everyone around him, but few had the courage to intervene. Ethan, upon seeing his father being removed in that way, felt a mixture of shame and revolt that momentarily paralyzed him. The previously lively audience now watched the scene with a strange stillness. Some whispered to each other, others looked away, while a few exchanged expressions of pity and solidarity. Maggie held her husband's hand tightly, showing strength despite the tightness in her chest. The feeling was that something was wrong, but no one knew exactly how to react. Jack, even feeling the weight of embarrassment, tried to maintain his dignity. His eyes sought Ethan's, sending a silent message that this humiliation did not diminish the love and pride he felt for his son. He knew that this would not be the last battle they would face, and that the strength he had within him would need to be greater than the injustice he suffered. As he walked away, Jack noticed Ethan's sad look, which represented much more than words could say. That situation left deep scars, not only on the family, but also on the small community that witnessed a time when appearance and prejudice threatened to erase years of struggle and dedication. The silence of the crowd. The crowd watching the ceremony remained in awkward silence after Jack left. The atmosphere, once festive, became heavy with the absence of this simple man who represented much more than he seemed. Conversations ceased and many people's eyes turned to Ethan, who was still standing at the entrance, torn between sadness and the desire to react. The silence spoke louder than any words could at that moment. Many people began to question internally whether what they had witnessed was fair. Prejudice seemed to have been an invisible wall that separated Jack from the right to be there. However, no one dared to break that barrier, out of fear, lack of courage, or not knowing what to do. Ethan felt the weight of that silence like a weight on his chest. He observed the emptiness that had formed around him, and knew that this day could be different, that his family deserved respect and recognition. Even so, the young man felt small in the face of the magnitude of the prejudice he had witnessed. The graduation ceremony continued, but Jack's absence was felt by all who understood the true meaning of that moment. It was a silence that cried out for justice, but that still needed to be broken by those who had the courage to face what seemed impossible: the decision to act. As Jack walked away from the ceremony, 5 men watched with concern. Led by Commander Steve Harper, a group of Navy SEALs who had served with Jack on dangerous missions. They could not accept the injustice they were witnessing. To them, Jack was a hero, someone who had saved their lives and deserved all their respect. Steve exchanged glances with his companions and made the decision to act. They would stand up to defend Jack's honor, to silence the prejudice and show that crowd who he really was. It was a necessary intervention, one that would forever change everyone's perception of that simple but courageous man. The group prepared to enter the gym with the imposing bearing that only war veterans possess. They knew that their presence would speak louder than any speech, and that respect would come naturally as their stories were revealed. The atmosphere was about to change. The SEALs' decision was more than an act of solidarity. It was an act of justice and recognition. They would not allow Jack's past and dignity to be erased by superficial judgments. The real battle was yet to begin. 2 SEALs enter. When Steve Harper and his 4 fellow SEALs entered the gym, the atmosphere changed instantly. Their presence commanded respect and aroused curiosity among the crowd, who began to whisper and stare at the group in awe. They approached Jack, who was leaning against the wall, visibly moved, and extended their hands in solidarity and friendship. Security tried to maintain order, but it was clear that something bigger was going on here. Steve spoke firmly, reminding everyone that this man was not only a proud father, but a Navy veteran who had risked his life for his country. The SEAL's stance changed the mood, and soon the respect that had previously been denied began to be returned to Jack. Ethan, moved, saw his father's eyes fill with hope. For the first time that day, he felt that the humiliation was being reversed. The crowd began to applaud timidly, recognizing the value of this man who, although simple in appearance, had a story worthy of honor and respect. The SEALs stood beside Jack and Ethan, ready to ensure that he could enter and attend the graduation with the dignity he deserved. The veteran's presence not only changed the situation, but empowered others to understand the true meaning of this moment. Words by Steve Harper. Steve Harper asked the crowd to be quiet and, in a firm voice, began to briefly tell who Jack Reynolds was. He revealed that Jack was one of the bravest members of the unit, who had led dangerous missions and saved lives. The story brought a respectful silence and a new perspective from everyone present, who had previously judged only by appearance. He emphasized that Jack never sought recognition or applause, but that at that moment it was necessary to honor the sacrifice and courage of that man. Steve emphasized that true strength is not in what one wears, but in character and actions. The sincerity of his words stirred deep emotion in the audience. As he spoke, Ethan felt a mixture of pride and relief. His father was being honored in the way he deserved, and he knew that this would not only be a turning point for that day, but for the Reynolds family's entire lives. The injustice that had been suffered was beginning to be righted before everyone's eyes. Steve's speech served as a turning point, transforming humiliation into respect. The previously silent crowd began to applaud warmly, recognizing the value of this simple man and his extraordinary trajectory. The invitation to enter. With the support of the SEALs, Jack was invited back to the ceremony. The school principal, visibly moved and embarrassed by what had happened, apologized for the situation and assured Jack that he would have a special place to watch his son's graduation. The official's move showed that prejudice was being confronted directly. Jack accepted the invitation with humility, but also with renewed dignity. He knew that this victory was symbolic, but it represented much more than a seat at a ceremony. It was recognition of a lifetime of service and protection. For him, this night had profound meaning. Ethan followed his father, holding his hand tightly as they crossed the entrance to the gym once more. The eyes of those present turned to them, now with respect and admiration. The presence of the SEALs by Jack's side made all the difference, sending the message that there was a true hero there. The ceremony continued with a different energy. The previously heavy atmosphere gave way to an atmosphere of honor and solidarity. That night would forever mark everyone's memory, especially Jack and his family. The moving speech. During the ceremony, the school principal asked to give a short speech in honor of Jack Reynolds. He highlighted the importance of the values that Jack represented: courage, perseverance, and love for family. The public recognition moved everyone, especially Ethan, who could not hold back tears when he saw his father being recognized. The director also mentioned the presence of the SEALs, reinforcing that the community should be proud to have among them men who have done so much for the country and who deserve unconditional respect. The words were met with warm and genuine applause, and the celebratory mood returned in full force. Jack, moved, silently thanked them, feeling that this moment was a true victory. He knew that he didn't need recognition to be someone special, but that this tribute showed that his struggle had not been in vain. For him, the love for his son and the honor of serving were the true reward. Ethan felt closer to his father than ever before. The night was theirs, and the humiliation was behind them. Now they shared the pride and joy of a dream come true, knowing that together they could overcome any obstacle. Reuniting with friends. After the ceremony, Jack and his family were surrounded by former Navy buddies in the audience. They greeted Jack with warm hugs, reinforcing their bond and admiration for him. The presence of his veteran friends reinforced the sense of belonging and acceptance he so desperately craved. Steve and the other SEALs took the opportunity to introduce Jack to local leaders and influential individuals who were present, strengthening his network of support and respect. It was a gesture that showed that Jack's military background was not only remembered, but valued and recognized by the community. Maggie was moved and thanked everyone who helped make that day so special. For her, seeing her family united and respected was the greatest achievement. Ethan's smile was a reflection of renewed hope for the future, a future in which they would no longer be judged by their appearance, but by their essence. The night ended with a sense of victory and justice restored. Jack knew that his journey was far from over, but that he now had a community by his side that finally recognized his worth. The silent reflection. At home, after the event, Jack sat on the porch looking at the starry sky, reflecting on everything that had happened that day. The mix of emotions was intense: pride, relief, but also the bitter memory of the prejudice he had suffered. He knew that this was a battle won, but others could arise. Maggie reached out and held his hand, offering strength and support. They talked about the future and how they could continue to fight for respect and equality, not just for themselves, but for other families in the community. This was a fight that went beyond a graduation ceremony. It was a fight for human dignity. Ethan walked in to say goodbye to his parents, his eyes saying more than words could express. The young man felt that the support of his family and friends had created a solid foundation for him to face any challenge. To him, his father was a living example of courage and integrity. That night, despite everything, ended with renewed hope. Jack knew that with his family and true friends by his side, nothing could bring him down. The future promised to be different, and the strength he carried within him would be the light that would guide his path. New beginnings. In the following days, Jack Reynolds' story gained repercussion in the city. The graduation episode went viral among residents, and admiration for the veteran only grew. Many began to see with new eyes those who, like Jack, live a simple but valuable life. Jack was invited to participate in community events and social projects, where he could share his experiences and inspire young people to pursue their dreams. This public recognition opened doors that previously seemed closed, and he embraced these opportunities with enthusiasm. Ethan, now more confident, continued his studies, motivated by his father's strength. The family grew even closer, strengthened by the difficulties they had overcome and by the certainty that together they could transform what seemed impossible into reality. The act of injustice suffered in high school was the starting point for a new phase in the Reynolds' lives. They learned that, even in adversity, truth and courage always find a way to shine. The awakening of inner strength. After the graduation ceremony, Jack felt an awakening within himself. It wasn't just about the public recognition, but about the strength he had carried for years, often underestimated. He decided that his story should serve a greater purpose, to inspire others who face prejudice or difficulties. Life in the small town would never be the same for the Reynoldses. Jack began participating in veterans groups, getting involved in social projects that helped at-risk youth. His mission now went beyond family. It was a calling to give a voice to those who had no voice. Ethan saw his father in a new light, admiring his courage and determination. They began working together on initiatives for young students, giving talks and motivational meetings. This connection further strengthened the bond between father and son. In that new routine, Jack discovered that his greatest weapon was resilience, and that true victory was not just in being recognized, but in transforming his pain into action and hope for others. Reconnecting with the past. One day, during a community event, Jack received an unexpected visitor. A former Navy commander, whom he had not seen in years, stopped by to greet him and congratulate him on his work. The visit rekindled painful memories, and also brought back a sense of pride in his military career. The commander recalled difficult moments, battles, losses and victories, emphasizing how Jack had always been an example of leadership and courage. That conversation renewed the flame of determination in Jack, who felt the importance of never forgetting his roots. At the same time, this connection to the past helped Jack understand that his current struggle was part of a larger story, of men and women who sacrifice themselves for the country and deserve respect in all spheres of life. Ethan followed everything, feeling that his father's figure was becoming increasingly imposing, not only as a war hero, but as an example of an honest and loving man. Forgiveness and reconciliation. In the midst of this transformation process, Jack decided to take on an even greater challenge, to forgive those who humiliated him at graduation. He knew that holding a grudge would only hinder his growth and that of his family. With the help of Maggie and some friends, Jack managed to contact one of the security guards responsible for the incident. In a sincere conversation, he heard apologies and explained how that moment affected his family. The conversation was difficult, but it opened the way for understanding and change. This act of forgiveness surprised the community and showed Jack's true greatness. He was not seeking revenge, but reconciliation and the building of a more just and respectful society for all. An enlightened future. The Reynolds' story became a symbol of hope and resilience in the city. Jack continued his social work, while Ethan pursued his studies with renewed motivation, dreaming of a bright future. Maggie devoted herself to her family, feeling grateful that they had weathered the storms together. At the following year's graduation ceremony, Jack was invited to speak, a public recognition that moved everyone. He spoke about courage, respect, and love, inspiring young people and adults to stand up against prejudice and injustice. The community learned a valuable lesson, not to judge by appearances, and to value those who truly make a difference. For the Reynolds, that story of humiliation and overcoming became a new beginning, a chapter where dignity, courage, and love triumphed. The story of Jack and his family shows us that true strength lies not in power or appearance, but in the courage to fight for what is right, even in the face of adversity. When we combine respect, love, and resilience, we are able to transform even the most difficult moments into lasting victories. If this story touched you, inspired you, or taught you an important lesson, be sure to subscribe to the channel to receive more real and moving stories like this one. Here, each video is designed to bring hope, learning, and motivation to your life. Click the subscribe button now, activate the bell so you don't miss any news, and join this community that values what really matters: courage, justice, and love for others. We are together on this journey of transformation and success. Until the next video,